Hi guys, this is Creative Cuts, a channel where I build, paint and create things. When I saw this bulldozer in the shop, I thought only one thing. Attempt to scratch build my favourite looking tank in the 40k universe, the Sicaran from Forge World. Now I've never done anything like this before, but if you don't try, you'd never know. So to begin with, I had an old Rhino that I could cannibalise for parts. There were a few little additions here that I needed to clip off, so I took some clippers and just carefully trimmed them quite close. That continued, and I realised that I needed to remove most of the raised areas. But I made myself a little paper template rather than cutting out materials, and working with the paper templates was fantastic, because at times I cut the paper a little small, so I was able to just put a little bit of tape, change the size, and then get the exact shape that I was after. I laid this on some 1mm styrene board and cut these out. I didn't really know where to start, but I just thought I could begin building out the bulk of the wheels and the tracks. And now these tracks are a completely different dimension to the original boxed tracks that you can get, so I had to adapt my design a little, but by using some foam board to build out the mass and working with hot glue just to speed up the whole process, I was able to sort of somehow muddle my way through. I had to kind of imagine what some of the shapes would look like and adapt them slightly to my design. And you know, I wasn't too fussed if things changed ever so slightly. It was kind of more my version of a Sicaran than an exact replica, so to speak. And then once I'd started to build out the immediate base, I cut some more 1mm styrene sheets to size and carefully applied these. And then just using a file, I smoothed out any edges and then began to stick these to the outside of the tracks. Again, I covered this with another sheet of 1mm styrene. And then I started working on some of the details. I had printed out a couple of photographs for reference, and again, you know, kind of began to apply some armor panels here and there and little details. And I found this really relaxing. You know, you could just focus on one task at hand. Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating when the little bits move around. But, you know, my way of working is pretty relaxed, really. As you can see, I kind of hold things up and measure it. It's not always 100% exact, but I also know that I can, you know, tidy a few things up as I go. Trim bits here and there and file them down, sand it back. So, not overly worried at this stage about, you know, everything being completely exact. Just trying to get an overall feel for the shape and, you know, let the journey guide me, so to speak. I used the same approach with the paper template and then traced this onto some more foam board, cut some shapes. And I had to kind of imagine what the rest of the build would look like at this stage in terms of measurements, because yes, I could have planned it, but it's difficult to measure something that doesn't exist yet. So this was kind of, you know, just kind of making it up as I go along and maybe leaving bits a little bit long in places so I know I could cut them back. And as I kind of started to work on the shapes, it became evident about how I was how to resolve some of the challenges. On the profile there's room for a heavy bolter, so I used the front panel of the Rhino and decided to make a little custom opening, and I kind of, as neatly as possible, tried to glue all this together. Again, you can really refine everything as you get further down the line. Things are definitely starting to take shape now, and we're rocking and rolling. So I made some diagonal pieces and then got some more styrene. And just beveled the edges a little, even in this fine scale. Still trying to get the joints as neat as possible the first time around was important to me, because a little extra attention at this stage means maybe less work down the line. One hopes. And just continuing to flesh out the back. Add in a little top section here. And then, being careful with the drill, I started to build an exhaust system out of just some little toy pipes that you can buy in a set, often used to build terrain with, but sometimes drill a few holes in, bit of super glue, some activator, and you're good to go. And I started to build the side sponsons. I think I made them out of a little spray paint safety cap, some little tubing, some O-rings as you can see here, a couple of little plasticky bits from sprues and bits, a couple of magnets, some las cannons on the side. You can always interchange your weapons because I've magnetised it now if you wanted to. And then I carefully applied it to the side of the tank, trying to get everything level and straight. And it's definitely starting to take shape. And I continued to build out the main turret part of the tank. Again, roughly following the shapes, but kind of at times slightly simplifying things just to work in my benefit, but still trying to keep the same aesthetic. And then for the main gun, I built this little chassis out of sort of various bits and bobs, and this was part of the forks of the bulldozer that I had before, and I thought that could make a nice main cannon. And then this little trash can that I cut into pieces, I thought kind of could be a nice little detail. I cut some more pipes, added these to the bottom, and then just with some styrene tubes that, just with a bit of experimentation, happened to fit nicely inside this tube. I realised that this other tube fits nicely inside this tube, and Bob's your uncle, you've got a gun. And with a couple of little details from the Rhino pack, Chaos Rhino pack, these little gargoyle type faces, and they really set off the gun nicely and will kind of make it work within my army that I'm building. And just a few more details here and there. Had a little bit of styrene angle and just used this to kind of hide any slightly more messy parts. Found a little fan piece in my bits box that I added on top. I thought this could be quite cool. and just making it up as I go along, really. Next I took some old headphones and just used these as some wires because they were quite flexible. And I've bought these little O-rings, tiny watch O-rings from the internet, and I find them great because sometimes you need a circle. Sometimes you just need a ready-made little round thing, and then, you know, I use them all the time. Then I had these little exhausts from a fighter jet model that I had that I never built, and kind of built these onto the back. They kind of nod to the more modern generation of Space Marine tanks. But obviously had to keep it chaos. And then next I dotted out where I'd like some rivets, and then with a pin vise just carefully drilled some holes. This took a while, but once it's done, and then you can move on to the next job. And then just carefully with a little dot of glue, I cut the heads off many pins and just popped these into the hole for rivets, and they work great. And I always keep a selection of nail files on to hand, different varieties of grit, and just began to slowly work my way around the model, you know, kind of slowly taking away any hot spots. And then with some milliput, I don't know if it was the best material to use in hindsight, but I covered all the gaps and sanded this back. This took ages and made a load of mess, but you know, actually maybe it was the long way around, but I think it did the job. Then I coated this with some primer. This happened to be some filler primer, I guess, which again helps my quest in just filling any little last gaps. But what I did notice is that I think in my haste, I didn't let coats in between dry properly, and some of the paint cracked in places because it hadn't cured, I guess. But you know, no problem. A bit of texture, I'll use it, and, you know, fix it as best I can. And I found that it didn't really matter in the end. And this is one of my favourite little things, and something that I've based my whole army around, just this one tube of paint. It's a cosmic gold sparkle. It's like the equivalent of a flip paint, I guess. It bounces in the light. Something that you would normally apply to in an automotive painting situation, or maybe a motorbike or something like that. And I used this over black in my whole army. I over diluted it a little bit in this case, but once dry, as you can see here, it's nice and even, and really just flicks the light every now and again as the light turns. And yeah, it's a little bright for me at this stage, so I'm going to knock it back just with some black ink, and washed up, and the whole thing, it's going to be grunged right down, but it still pops that little bit of colour every now and again, and throughout my whole army it's an effect that I think worked really well. Just kind of getting the darker areas, any shadows. And then I wanted to make some debris for the tracks, as if it had just been blasting at high speed through deep terrain. I got some trusty earth from the outside, popped this in with some glue. I had some finer sediment as well, a couple of roots as well, why not? some finer, a little bit of sand, I think. Yeah, just to kind of give it a little bit of a grainy, gritty texture. And with some water, I kind of began to mix this up into a consistency, sort of going back and forth until I was happy with the consistency that I wanted. And then I added some paint, some brown and some black in this case, just to get that dark, thick, muddy appearance. And then with the wooden spatula, just began to carefully apply this throughout. And there was no real rhyme or reason about this. I just, as much as possible, try to keep the mud on the tracks, and imagine where the mud would sort of splash and get caught up in, to kind of again give that idea of forward momentum. And this was pretty quick, it was a lot of fun. And then just with some really sort of fine down black, just gave it some scrapes and the beginnings of some discoloration here and there. And just being sort of careful, and barely any paint on the brush at all really, just scratching it backwards and forwards and slowly building up, and erring on the side of caution, I guess. And then I did the same with some silver, just to kind of get some areas where the paint has really been scratched off, and it's really down to the bare metal underneath. Any bits that are overdone, I kind of could always go back with some of the gold or whatever, and just kind of blend it all together. But just particularly at the front, wanted it sort of more heavy, and then just little bits here and there. I wanted to kind of rust over the top of this a little bit as well, to kind of imply that it'd been there for a long, long time. And by no means am I some expert with weathering or anything like that. I kind of watch videos like anyone else and just make it up as I go along, really, and try and find out what works best. And experiment is the key, really, for me. I found is just to have a go and try. And then next I added some transfers here and there, just to kind of add some detail and some colour. And then I mixed up a sort of really dark, grimy, black and brown, dark burnt umber wash. And this is an oil-based wash, just thinned down heavily with some white spirit, some mineral spirit, I think it's called in America. And then to my favourite combo, as you may have seen in other videos, is AK Interactive Streaking Grime and some rust, which is just basically rust in a pot. And then taking my time, I kind of draw these down and thin it back with some more spirit, and sort of slowly just build up a whole grimy, greasy, horrible mess. And then this is the rust in the pot. You can, if you watch carefully, you can literally watch the paint dry in almost seconds, and then immediately it almost gives you this slightly crusty, ultra matte kind of variation in colour. And it's one of my discoveries that I cannot rate highly enough. It's fantastic. I kind of just work my way around, just picking out little bits, bip, 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 bip. And the good thing is as it dries, it applies the pigment in uneven ways, so it doesn't look painted on, or and you can thin it back with water, just to kind of really draw out the colour if you want. And then with some brown ink, just hit the sort of bottom again, and again just build up those darker areas, give it a little bit of richness in colour. Just trying to pile on that overall grimy vibe for my Black Legion army, which isn't really black, so to speak, because like the black I've substituted for this flip gold. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. Now, I started with, I don't know, what I can only describe as a pretty far-fetched idea, really, and hope, and a ton of imagination, and with some perseverance and determination, I couldn't be happier with the result. Now, if you've liked what you've seen and would like to see more, you're very welcome to subscribe. Hit the bell button to stay up to date with all the latest videos. You can give the video a like, let YouTube know you appreciate this kind of video, and share it with a friend who you think might find it interesting. Now, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and possibly even learned a few things, but I'd definitely encourage you all to go out and try something like this yourself. You may even surprise yourself. Enjoy.